Welcome inside another episode of Point to the Passer. I don't know how, but I am exhausted from this week already. I think it was probably the mental drain of bubble life that took it out of me. The waiting game during those 48 hours was brutal after an impossibly close loss to Duke in the semis of the ACC tournament. But as of Sunday evening, around 6:05 p.m., very early on in Selection Sunday, Carolina is in. We've got a ton to get to, and we're going to start with how the Heels got here, address some of the drama around the committee's decision to include Carolina, and there was a lot of drama around it, and give a high-level breakdown of the tourney field. Jonathan, this is March, and for the first time ever, Carolina is in the first four, playing as an 11 seed. Also in the field are your Montana Grizz. How are you feeling heading into this week?
I feel great about that. That's the Grizz are in the field for the first time. I think it's since 2019, and no first four for us, man. We're sitting safely, just waiting on Wisconsin later in the week. I'm really excited for them, and we'll see what they can do. They've had a history of having some upsets. It's been a while, so maybe they're due. And I think that Wisconsin team is really good. I like them to make some noise, but hoping that Money Williams and the Grizzlies can spring the upset in round one.
One of the best names in college basketball all year long to follow, Money Williams. That's been a guy that we've gone back to, especially during some of UNC's struggles. Just check out how Money is doing. He's going to be taking on the number 3 seed Wisconsin there alongside the rest of his Grizz team. And as you said when we got on, the Grizz earned it the old-fashioned way, winning their conference tournament, unlike some of this bubble selection drama that we're going to get to. But yeah, congrats on sealing that one. It's got to feel real good.
It does, and there was a lot of drama for our family in terms of just the tournaments, selection Sunday. My wife went to George Mason,
Hmm.
and we know we don't need to revisit what happened with George Mason a few years ago, but it really came down to the fact that, and we'll get more into it, obviously, but there were few teams that took a bid that were not otherwise going to be in the field. And George Mason was one of those teams that had a chance. That game goes down to the wire. Unfortunately for my wife and Patriots everywhere for George Mason, they didn't make it. I claimed that I was cheering for George Mason, to support the family, even though I knew if if they won, Carolina was out. We'll never really know. I'm still standing by it, but honestly, it was a wild Saturday, Sunday, kind of like you said, waiting things out.
Yeah, it sure was. We knew the stress was going to be there going into that day. Like I said at the top of the show, it's going to be a really, really tough waiting game after that Duke loss. We don't have to revisit that drama either. We know how that ended. Could have gone either way in overtime. Could have gone either way. So we're just going to leave it at that. You will never know what's going to happen. What we do know is that we're in the tournament, and that is really thanks to those top seeds locking things down in their conference tournament. We just mentioned George Mason. If you didn't watch that game, against VCU. George Mason had one rim out at the very, very end. Looked like it was so close, could have tied things up and forced an overtime. Memphis held out strong with a double-digit win, or maybe it was 9 or 10 points over UAB, despite Yaxel Lindeberg. I was texting you about this guy, Jonathan. He had 30 points and 20 rebounds against ECU in the first game of their tournament. Then he had 23 and 13 against North Texas, 19 and 17 against Memphis. So he came to play in the conference tournament, but it wasn't quite enough. I love seeing those kinds of guys. It would have been fun to see him play in the NCAA tournament. However, really, really prefer to see us there. But we'll get to a few of those guys like Yaxel, guys like Bennett Sturts with Drake and a few others. There's a kid on Liberty I want to point out as well who might be next year's or this year's Jack Golke as well. So do you have your eyes on any stars that you want to bring up here at the top of the show? Let people know some of those bet lines they want to get in on.
Bennett Sturts is a great one. And the fact that, I mean, that team with Drake and their coach, Ben McCollum, coming from D2 with several of those guys and doing what Drake has done has been really, really impressive. He's going to be a fun one to watch. They're a dangerous team. I mean, I think you look at teams like McNeese State, and they have several guys who played at high major programs. Quadir Copeland, somebody we're familiar with, who was at Syracuse. So not so much for him a star necessarily, but just what McNeese might be able to do in a classic committee selection with Will Wade going up against his alma mater in Clemson. That's an interesting matchup. So those are a few that come to mind. I also I don't have somebody specific on UC San Diego, but the Tritons, what a phenomenal nickname. And they
So good.
unbelievable year for them. I think they only had 4 losses all year. They're going to be a tough out
Hmm.
against Michigan, I think it is. So
Yep.
there's a few of the games kind of looking ahead some of those teams that we always get excited about, the Cinderellas, the teams that really become household names and the players, like you said, Jack Golke, that go along with it, that just really seem to come out of nowhere this time of year that makes it so fun.
Yeah, there's always one or two. The year that it was Steph Curry has probably got to be one of the absolute best when you'd watch him play during the regular season. And I mentioned this on other episodes before. I got to see him play in college, and then just to see him absolutely go off in that tournament and make the run that he did. And who knew how he was going to turn out, just into an absolute legend. But that's what March is all about. And so we're excited to see who it's going to be. We're going to get around to all that, but the first thing we want to start with really tonight is talking about the drama surrounding the bubble talk that's been going on over the last couple weeks, but really here within the last week, and especially with UNC not getting its second quad one win against Duke, an injured Duke team this past Friday evening. That was a tough one to swallow for all Carolina fans. Jay Billis always says that it always delivers, and he's right. And this year, unfortunately, him and Dan were not there in person to see it because, the ACC is down and we're going to go to the SEC. I hope they enjoy their time at the SEC, but they missed an absolute classic in the comeback that was UNC showing its resilience. Um, they almost had it. And fortunately, early on in the selection show on Sunday, we didn't have to wait long. We were on the edge of our seats. I was preparing for it to be the worst news possible. And we sneak in just a few picks into the show. Like I said, just a few minutes in. And it was just such relief. I know it's not the season that we wanted, but we're still hanging on. And I want to take the words of Seth Trimble when he said, we got something to prove in March, and he's excited to see what Jalen Withers does in March, and for him to get another opportunity here at the court and see where it goes. I mean, anything's possible, and the 11 seeds actually have proven pretty well in years past. So, Jonathan, what was your gut reaction to being announced so early in the show? I know it kind of caught both of us off guard, but kind of refreshing too to get it over with and just enjoy the rest of the 20 minutes of the selection show.
That was the best part. Yeah, was not having to wait and be in suspense. That time of the evening is bath time, dinner and bath time at my house with a toddler. So I'm glad they got it in because I was out and it was bath time right after that. So I didn't have to wait in suspense or get a notification on my phone in between his slam dunks in the bathtub. So
Which
so
is
that
true.
was
He is
good.
dunking on a 1 foot, 2 foot rim. What are we looking at now?
We've got him up to 2.5, so we're really trying to get him
Beautiful.
ready
It's
to
great.
be dunking on 10 by age like 8 or 9 is the
Call up
goal.
Jim Tanner. Make sure he knows.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was a little surreal. I think we both felt that to see that because we're getting ready to have waited out the last spot, even not be in the field, not see Carolina's name called. And so when the name pops up, it just didn't process right away. But obviously very excited. And then it wasn't really until later on that started to think about the fallout in terms of who is upset. I guess everybody who was not a Carolina fan
100%.
is
Everybody,
upset
man.
about this. But yeah, in terms of that piece of it, I mean, the other piece for me was going in. My gut, because you asked me in the morning, was what was your gut say? And I said that we'd be in because I really felt a couple of things. One, they've changed the metrics that we'll talk more about in terms of what they're considering with teams, especially on the bubble. But two, and the committee's never going to say this, and it has nothing to do with Bubba being in the chair, but it is a TV show. We are one of the biggest brands in the sport. And so you want your big brands to draw eyeballs. Consistently, you look at
Mhm.
the some of the biggest games in terms of TV numbers have been games that Carolina has played in, whether it's against Duke, you go back to Kansas national championship game, did huge numbers, a championship game, but still, it's different when Carolina's involved. And so I felt for those reasons that Carolina was going to get in. Then I saw the Vegas lines on DraftKings and FanDuel, and I felt less good about that because Vegas always knows. and we had the worst odds of any of the bubble teams
Hmm.
uh, by Vegas. But the piece that I held on to was they are really, really good and dialed in when it comes to outcomes of games. You're talking about here the decision of a room of human beings who they could go in any direction. It's a lot harder to predict what that room of people is going to do versus when you have the analytics and numbers on games over a period of time. So I held on to that. But all that to say, I still was surprised, pleasantly surprised that we were
Hmm.
included, and then bracing for what the narrative would be as the deluge of anger and outrage, some of it for media purposes, I guess, too, right? Uh,
Right.
whether it's real or uh, enhanced for the purposes of a narrative, it definitely came on pretty strong and pretty fast.
It feels pretty real to me. I feel like there's some genuine anger at the brand, and I
Yeah.
get it. I get it to an extent. You see the 1-12 quad one record, and that's an ugly season against quality opponents, and that's just what it is. You do have 8-0 in quad two, which is nice, but no one's talking about quad two. They're talking about the importance of the big wins. But the fact of the matter is that the committee considers a lot more than just quad one, which seems to be where guys like Seth Davis and Seth Greenberg and Stephen A. Smith and John Rothstein and even our boy John Fanta a little bit, who we love and adore. And like you said at the top of the show, Jonathan, when I sent you that clip, it was like you saw Fanta turn it against Carolina. It hurt a little. It hurt a little, but every media member has an opinion right now, and a lot of it is really focused on quad one. But if you take that metric and you combine it with the rest of them, I want to give a quick rundown of this. The heels of the bubble teams here listed out first in the net of those teams, first in Kim Pom, first in BPI, the Basketball Power Index, first in Bar Torvik, first in strength of record, third in strength of schedule, but first in non-con strength of schedule. And then wins against the bubble. And I want to talk to you a little bit about this as well, because Bubba had a commentary on how this kind of played in as a factor as well. We were first in wins against bubble, and then second in non-con wins against bubble. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that metric. But when you look at the work as a whole, and maybe add in a little bit of recency bias, which I do think we need to figure out some kind of weighted system, because a team that plays in November is different than a team that is coming and forming together in February and early March. And if you really want the best top quality product, and you want a product that is good for the viewer and yes, good for TV ratings, then you need to consider the only two losses we have over the last month are to Duke. That's it. I know the ACC is down. I know we've struggled elsewhere. But if you look at all these metrics and then you look at how Carolina has been playing and look at their winning margin as well, again, the eye test says there's no reason. And it's really backed by the metrics if we can get some of these sports media off of the narrative of 1-12, which doesn't seem possible right now.
No, and here's the thing. You can be as upset as you want about it, and it's not going to change it.
Right.
Even a lawsuit by the governor of West Virginia will ultimately not change the fact that Carolina is in the field and West Virginia is not. I mean,
When
it
you
is
think
what
you've
it
seen it
is.
all, Jonathan,
I'm not to the point that I'm going to pull out the Carolina box of tissues like Mark Packer did on his show
that was great.
today, but
Yeah.
that was, as a Carolina fan, that was worth the watch of him pulling out a tissue for all those people you mentioned, like Rothstein and Jerry Palm and all these other people who are outraged by this. But yeah, you bring up a good point that, look, when you actually go down these other metrics, if you look at the entire puzzle and not the one piece, then you have a really good case for Carolina compared to these other teams who also have very flawed resumes. And that's kind of the point. As you pointed out, Tate Frazier with One Shining Podcast and The Ringer had a great response on Twitter when somebody said, "Well, they don't deserve it." What's your response to that? It's like, well, that's true of all these bubble. That's kind of the point. That's why they're on the bubble.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
don't deserve to be in the tournament. So ultimately, it is up to this committee to decide. And there is a cut line, and that is what it is. But so it it has been a firestorm of just the, again, the outrage primarily from the media, but the wins against the bubble piece, and Andrew Jones with Tar Heel Illustrated has reported on this and brought up a really good point that even a year ago, right? Bubba's been on this committee for multiple years. He was on the
Hmm.
committee when we were the first team out in
Right.
22,
Very
23.
important. Yep.
Right. And so that context, like, okay, well, we didn't get in that time. So what's different now? Um, in terms of people having conspiracies that he somehow has has doctored this thing or it's corrupt. But he said even up to a year ago that he felt like, and this is true, I feel this way too, the net is a flawed system. The
Hmm.
quad system as part of the net, which is a way to try to provide context to the analytics of the net and the teams that you play, is also flawed. So he wanted to bring in other metrics, which they did, whether it was using Bart Torvik's analytics along with Ken Palm and then the wins against the bubble that you mentioned, essentially looking at, okay, our record compared to a bubble team, will we have more or less wins with that schedule compared to those bubble teams? Um, and we were the best of the bubble teams in that metric. And that ultimately matters because if you swap these other teams into our schedule and you play the 10, they break the quads even further, like the quad 1A. We were 0-10 against those teams, but you're talking about some of the best teams in the country. Obviously,
Hmm.
number one Duke 3 times. You
Yep.
have Auburn, who's the number one overall seed in the tournament. You have Alabama, who was right there in conversation for another number one seed. Duke and Alabama are only two quad one opportunities that we played at home the entire year. And the majority, not only the majority of bubble teams, but the majority of the teams in the tournament who are outside of like the top 10 to 15 teams in the country are losing a lot of these games. Now, they're not losing necessarily all 10 or going 1-12. And so I get like there's a real reason. If we got left out, I was okay with it.
Hmm.
I think you
Same.
clearly can make a case that we did not do what we needed to do. As you and I had talked about really all
Yep.
season, the next opportunity came up and we didn't come through, whether it was at Pitt or at Wake or at Clemson. You go down the list, the
Sure.
last two Duke games, we ultimately didn't do the things that we felt like we needed to at this point go to the ACC championship game at least to make sure. We didn't do it. So we left things out of our hands and it the bubble burst the way that it did, I guess. And so here we are. But you have to look at the full puzzle rather than, like you said, that one piece that people are stuck on. But it's more about the narrative. And at this point, it is the narrative has a life of its own, not so much here's the fuller picture. And here's where I'm going to get a little heated about this. Guys like Fanta know this. I love you, John Fanta. You're our guy, but you know better than anybody when you look at the analytics and you look at this piece, it's not just about one thing. And so why not take that all into consideration, right? Rather than let's focus on this one piece and now we're going to use really charged language like this is a crime, this is a miscarriage of justice. This is a basketball tournament. Let's calm down. Okay? This is
Let's
a basketball
relax. Yeah.
tournament. Let's not lose complete perspective. I get that we're passionate about this, all of us. I get that guys like Fanta and Rothstein are and Rothstein's kind of like a caricature of himself. But
For
but
sure.
like these guys are passionate. I get it. They love college basketball. We do too. But let's not lose the plot completely here. And that's what's happened, honestly. And so if you looked at the whole picture and you said to me, if Fanta said, look, Carolina's out because of this reason, I've looked at all this data, fine. There's a case that West Virginia should be in over us. You look at Bracket Matrix, which has bracketologists, I love that term because it's made up. Bracketologists, now there's hundreds of them, right? It's not just Lenardi. There's hundreds of them, and all of the brackets had West Virginia in. And that was unprecedented in the history of them doing this over several years.
Yep.
So there's a case to be made that, yeah, that
Hmm.
West Virginia should have been in, but there were other teams like Xavier that I would say Carolina should be in ahead of. The bottom line, as I got rolling here, is look, it, you could argue one way or another. It happened the way that it happened. It's not because Bubba was on the committee. The last thing that someone like Bubba wants is to be in that situation, right? It just,
No.
this is the way that it happened. It's a coincidence. I don't think it's ever happened before. It's unfortunate that that's the way it goes. But miscarriage of justice? Come on, guys. Like, let's get out of here with this. somebody gets so-called snubbed every year on the bubble. This happens every year. People are outraged every year. There just happens to be a new level of outrage because it's Carolina, we're a huge brand, and Bubble was on the committee. But let's calm down with all of that. So that's my I got rolling. I got fired up, Craig. Let's keep going because man,
I'm here for it, man.
I hope that Carolina takes this energy, takes all.
Hmm.
We're not talking about bulletin board. We're talking about an entire wall. We're talking about an entire facility worth of motivational
Hmm.
material that they can take into Dayton for tomorrow night and hopefully get a big win over San Diego State.
Just like I told you earlier today, I said if I'm the video editor and the videographer for this team right now, I'm creating some kind of compilation of every single screenshot, every single media clip, and I'm making a hype video based on all these media analysts that have counted Carolina out, and I'm playing it for Hubert and the team at some point.
Yeah,
And you're right, the amount of content out there is just endless right now. It's endless.
right. Yeah, and I mean you can always have an argument, right? This again, this happens every year to some degree. This is
Right.
just different for the
Someone's
reasons we
always going to be
mentioned.
upset. Absolutely.
Right. But and so like I can hear an argument that Tucker DeVries from West Virginia is injured, but he's been injured basically all season. Cliff Omori has been off of our roster since, well, the transfer portal when our dreams were dashed, and
We lost
we
our biggest big. He just
that's
graduated after 5 years of playing.
right.
Can we factor that in?
Thank you. We lost Armando Baycott. Yeah, I think we should. I think if we're factoring in injuries from December, Baycott not being on this team is something we need to weigh. And if he's on this team, man, I think first four, we're in the final four, man. This is a championship level team. A great point. So it's just getting silly at this point. And again, there's some of it's not real outrage. The only people I will hear real outrage from, honestly, because I know it's genuine, I know it's true, we all do, are NC State fans who like this now has given
Hmm.
them a reason to watch March Madness this year. This is giving them breathing life into an otherwise forgettable season. Are they going to make the CBI tournament? Are they going to get invite because they're not in the crowd? They're not in the NIT. Maybe they'll skip out on the CBI if they get offered. That would be the way to go. But hey, you know what? You're welcome. You have a reason to hate watch, which is what you do the best anyway, because that is what you do outside of last year. Congratulations for once in every 37 years, but good for you. So that's the only state fans. I will give you that genuine outrage. The Fantas, the Rothsteins, the
Hmm.
whoever
Hmm.
else, Shannon Sharp.
Do it for
Are
the
you even
clicks.
watching college
That's how I
basketball?
felt about Stephen A. He just chimes in this time of year. That's
Yeah.
it. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
No, that's his show. Like that's the whole show is I'm going to be
Yeah.
outraged about everything. So,
Right. Yeah.
um, so here's me being outraged about people being outraged in fake capacities.
Yeah, point to the passer is now all about rage bait, apparently, this
Yeah.
week. It all started with the ACC tournament that How Dare Carolina podcast picked Carolina to win the ACC tournament. I was pulling for that so hard, not just for Carolina because it would have meant a lock in the NCAA tournament and less stress for us, but because of all the replies that had come in. Like, my God, I didn't know that cheering for your team was so frowned upon these days. Like, you know our podcast. You know we're from Chapel Hill. You know all we do is follow Carolina basketball from I would say November to March and April, but it's more so like May to May.
And it wasn't even that unrealistic. Like I get that Cooper Flag was hurt, and let's throw in superstar now Malik Brown
Sure.
as well. I get they had to like you know the seriously like the transcendent star Cooper Flag out and a important defensive role player in Malik Brown, but we lost by 3 points. We're within 1 point when all
Right.
those things happened at the end of that game, and like it was never ridiculous, right? Like if we had the fourth best odds to win the tournament, so it was never it wasn't like State winning the tournament last year, which you
Right.
unless you were a
Right.
State fan, you wouldn't have pulled
You
that
didn't
out of
pick.
thin
Yeah.
air, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hilarious. You were on a roll too because you started off cold
It
that
was,
the first
whew,
round, but once we got
yeah, 0 and
into
3.
the second round and the quarterfinals, you were rolling, man.
I felt good, man. We were trying to go for, after that day one, we were trying to go for the perfect bracket until, until the free throw happened. So we'll take it. It is what it is. But hey, we've done enough rage baiting and dwelling on this. I want to focus on the actual matchup that we earned against San Diego State. So this is Carolina's first ever 11 seed, the highest seed they're ever gonna, I guess, highest, lowest, however you just decide to say it, but we're going to be an 11 seed. Previously, our lowest was an 8. So this is going to be our first ever play-in game. Jonathan, what do you see in San Diego State? We were talking about it a little bit the other day. Tempo is going to be a big thing for us. We're obviously Carolina traditionally a very, very fast team. Don't want to get too fast because we can get a little sloppy on the turnovers, but take control of the ball as I see it and really push the pace against what really is a slower San Diego State team, a very good defensive team, but a little bit slower tempo. So, what do you see as the keys to success, and what stands out to you on this matchup?
Yeah, I can kind of go broad overview, bigger picture first, and then get a little bit more granular. Um, but that piece is really important. What you said at the start there is this is a team that's going to want to play this game probably more in the 60s, 70s score wise. They are going to be a little bit more methodical in terms of pace. They're going to want to get this into a half court defensive grinded out battle. And really make Carolina work on that side of the court in the half court rather than us getting out in transition where we know we are very dangerous if we can do that. This is not like a Tony Bennett, Virginia team by any means. That's not the way that Brian
Mhm.
Dutcher plays, but they are a very, very strong defensive team, and that is really what sets them apart. Because offensively, they have their share of issues. They've also had an injury. Maybe they had people graduate that haven't been on the team this year as well that would have factored in pretty big time. Um, so so that's piece number one. I think if you look at some of the other things that they don't do as well, well, one of them is twofold. So something they do really well is block shots. They have the
Mhm.
highest block percentage in the entire country. So they block a good amount of shots. That is something that I think we need to keep an eye on, given our smaller guards going into the lane and at times forcing up difficult shots and against longer teams that can protect the rim really well.
Mhm.
But they also foul a lot too. So they are a team that are good. They will send you to the free throw line. They are lower, I want to say, in the 300s in terms of free throw rate by opponents. So all that to me says they're an aggressive defensive team. They also on the perimeter have three different guys who are above a steal a game. Their best player, Nick Boyd, averages a steal a game. Miles Bird he's at over two a game, and BJ Davis at 1.5. So you got to take care of the ball. Uh, so that's my takeaway is broad overview is tempo. We want to try to control this pace and be the aggressor and dictate the pace and the tempo, which is playing faster, getting out in transition, but we're going to have to take care of the ball to do that. And so this is a big Elliot Cadeau game. He's got to be smart with the basketball, especially in the half court. Let's not force things that aren't there. Let's focus more on ball movement and some of the off the ball cutting that when we've been at our best, that's really when our offense has been the most efficient and most successful. So that piece of it, but then attacking and doing it under control and aggressive but smart in terms of getting to the free throw line. So not just driving to try to get fouled, but you're trying to
Mhm.
finish
Right.
through contact. And that's something that we've done better late here in the season. Guys like, I mean, talk about Seth Trimble. That's one of the things that he does best is attacking, getting to the line. He's a great free throw shooter, but he's also finishing through contact. We saw that time and time again against multiple teams, but in that Duke game, he was a big part of that comeback from 24 down. Van Allen Lubin, another guy who's really stepped up, and I think he can be pretty effective against the San Diego State front court. So the getting to the free throw line is big, and then the last piece, kind of broad overview, is rebounding. This is not a great rebounding team. I mean, we've talked all season about Carolina being historically just an odd rebounding to not a great rebounding team, but the fact that Seth Trimble for so long was leading us in rebounding was unprecedented, basically.
Mhm.
Lubin is now leading us at about 5.6 a game, Seth a little over five. Uh, but Magoon Guath for San Diego State, he leads them in rebounding at a little over five. They're just not a very good rebounding team, I think, for as aggressive as they can be on defense. and get some turnovers and block shots. I do wonder about the physicality. I think that the way that we've been playing with some of those guys inside with Trimble and Lubin and others, I think we can finish in there. I think we can make an impact and also the way we've been crashing the glass. So those are the areas kind of broadly I would say that Carolina needs to win in those areas. And so specifically getting to the free throw line, being aggressive, win the rebounding battle, and then win the battle for tempo and control of the game.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the big things that really limited us against Duke was the 3-point shooting where we went 3 for 17, and yet we still ended up in a 3-point game. And yes, I know they had no Cooper, and that's a big factor. No Malik Brown either, but 3 for 17. Given the way that we've shot it the last month, you really hope that that's not the performance you get. Cold shooting nights happen. That's really where Carolina struggled in that game, and also 16 for 24 from the line. Yeah, just again, not just three-pointers. I think you just got to tighten up a few things, but you should be right there in it. And you're not playing a Duke team. San Diego State is, I believe, in the 40s in KenPom, and we are, a little bit ahead of them. So when you look at that, I think you feel pretty good about the matchup. San Diego State is 46th, and we are 33rd officially. If you go back to the Q1 thing and the quad one wins, San Diego State does have 5 wins overall against the field throughout the entire season. They've beat Houston, they beat Creighton, New Mexico, Colorado State, and California, San Diego, who will take on Michigan, like you mentioned. And we, of course, just have that one win over UCLA. But I think playing under control, getting back to a little bit more consistent 3-point shooting, making sure that, from the free throw line that you're really taking advantage of those points. And I do see this being a win for us, trying to take off the UNC blue goggles. And I really take a step back and look at the analytics and look at some KenPom predictions. I feel pretty good about where we are. Especially in terms of looking at conference tournament performances too. San Diego State did not win a game in the Mountain West. They just went one and done. So they've been kind of sitting there for a little bit now, waiting for this game, which can sometimes hurt a team, and also doesn't bring as much confidence. They don't bring as much in with them to the tournament. Whereas, we've been playing really well the last month or so. We won 2 really solid games, a redemption game against Wake Forest as well, which is a nice one to get, and then almost a redemption game against Duke. And I think the team's got to be really proud of how they played in that second half. They did not accept that they were going to be down and out in the first half. I did. I was really down by halftime. Had a few friends saying, believe in it just a little bit. We'll see what happens, and they pulled me back into it. And ultimately, it becomes such a close matchup, just like we love to see from Carolina and Duke. But I'm with you the whole way. I think we focus on this SDSU game. And then we, look ahead to Ole Miss when the time comes, if we are fortunate. Just a brief glance at Ole Miss. If we do end up getting past San Diego State, Ole Miss is obviously out of the SEC. They are 21st in KenPom. A little bit faster tempo at 130th compared to San Diego State, which is way down there at 245th. Carolina's at 34. So again, that we've always run fast. That's going to be a big thing if we are going to go on a run to actually make sure the offense does run. Ole Miss 25th defensive rating, whereas San Diego State 13th. So that's going to be, again, where holding on to the ball really comes into play. But at the end of the day, Roy always said, got to make the shots, and the ball looks better when it goes in the basket, and that's what you really hope from this team. I love seeing their reaction to getting in the tournament. I think it caught them off guard a little bit how early it came too. There's a video that the team posted, and it pans over, and my favorite thing about that entire video is Seth Trimble's just locked in. It's like Kobe style, no reaction, like job finished. Job's not finished. He's ready for more. I think he's going to have a big tournament.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic. I love everything you're seeing from Seth Trimble in terms of just his attitude, his leadership, and the way again that he battled back in that Duke game when I, it would like you said it would have been easy for them to just accept that this is not going to happen. It's not even realistic to think we're down 24 points at this point to this Duke team, regardless of who's on the floor or not. We got absolutely out hustled, outplayed, out coached, everything in that first half, and to come back and be right there at the end the way they did. You're right. So, I mean, I think it's got to be the intensity. You got to play with your hair on fire. This is it, man. This is the NCAA tournament,
Right.
and I think the thing that I was most frustrated with in the Wake game and the Duke game in the ACC tournament was we came out flat. You just can't come out lifeless.
Hmm.
And when your season is on the line, the way that it was, I get that it can also, I imagine it's exhausting to have every game feel like it's an elimination game, and that can add up. But um, so they got to come out with intensity, with passion that we've seen them when they play like that. They're a really dangerous team. So that's what you need to see because to your point about San Diego State, yeah, this is a really good defensive team. You said 13th in KenPom, they're 14th in Torvik.
Hmm.
Torvik also has them as the 19th best team as it relates to 3-point percentage for opponents at
Hmm.
30.4%. So that to me also says that you're going to have ball movement is key. We cannot get
Right.
into a isolation type of basketball game where
Don't
there's a
want to see
lot of
it. No.
dribbling at the top of the key. You're taking tough threes. Yes, these guys like RJ and Ian can hit those shots, but it's that is playing exactly into the way that San Diego State wants this game to go, where they're also strong in the interior. So their 2-point percentage is eighth in the country. So again, this is a solid defensive team, but I think you test out the fact that Magoon Guath for them, who's 7 feet tall, he's a freshman. He's got a lot of potential. He's raw, but he looks like an NBA prospect from what I've seen. And he's been out since the end of February. So he's supposed to be available for this game. I would guess that he is, unless he really just can't go. He's had a knee injury, but he should be available. So you just kind of see what he can do. Can you take advantage in the interior? Otherwise, they have some long forwards, but it's not like they have another 7-footer sitting there on the bench who's ready to come in. So I think that's a key question here too. Ultimately, I agree with you that Carolina. I think Carolina's the better team in this matchup. I think they're also, like you said, they're playing better. They are playing their best basketball at this time of year. That being said, I'm picking San Diego State to win this game, um, and maybe some of that is just me hedging my emotional
Hmm. Hmm.
emotional bets. But my worry is my worry is that we do. I don't think we come out flat like we did in those last two games, but I think there's going to be periods like there has been for every game that we played. We're going to stagnate, and does that snowball, right? Does that get to a point where can we work through that? Um, Look, I don't think that San Diego State's offense is one like when Duke was on the way that they were in Chapel Hill,
Hmm.
that you get worried about getting blown out of the building, right? This team isn't a great shooting team, but if they have one of those nights and we're struggling offensively, I think they're sound enough defensively. It could give us problems. So I am picking them to win as I'm saying it. I think I am hedging my bets emotionally because we
Hmm.
are the better team, but um, it's not going to be an easy game. We're a 3.5 point favorite.
Sure.
I do think this is going to be come down to the end, maybe be like a 4 or 5 point game at the end of this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Not much else to say on it except I'm going the opposite direction. I'm picking the heels. I really do feel
I
like
love
Elliott's gonna. He's had a tough go, but you pointed out to me, and I saw it too, that he had a good game against Duke. And it's what we need. It's what we need from him. It's what we've been waiting on. He had a game recently where I think he hit 10 assists, and so if he can have some kind of hybrid of the two there, where he's being the playmaker, being the point guard that we need him to, not doing clear outs, not trying to go to the rim against this team and just getting blocked, right?
Right.
That's where you start running into trouble, and then suddenly you don't trust your point guard to actually run an offensive set, and you get into this ISO clear out where things just again spiral. That's where consistently throughout the year we've gone from maybe a 2 point game to a down 10. And then
Yeah.
it's just over. So those are the things that we'll be looking for. Anything else on SDSU? I want to take the last part of the show definitely to get into some more of the deep dive, but want to allow you a little time to jump on anything else here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two guys really to feature are Nick Boyd. He's a transfer from Florida Atlantic. So he's somebody who, as it turned out, he played against San Diego State on the biggest stage in the Final Four in that game that Lamont Butler, who's now at Kentucky, hits the buzzer beater mid-range on the baseline to send San Diego State to the championship game. So he's been in big games before. I think that honestly is pretty unique that you have two teams that 22 and 23, these
Hmm.
were teams playing for the national championship, and now they're facing in the first four.
Right.
You
That
don't
just speaks
necessarily,
to like the portal and everything in the chaos of college basketball right now, right? I mean,
it does,
it
and
just
it
shows.
also speaks to this being a TV show. It's imagine that they got matched up against each other.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Hey, I thank you, committee. I would much rather play San Diego State than Texas because we just
God, that
know for
never
whatever
goes
reason
well.
how that's going to
Yeah.
go. Um, but I think somebody like Nick Boyd has been in big moments before, and so he's somebody that he's the head of the snake for them. He's their leading scorer, not huge numbers, a little over 13 points a game, but he's also their leading assist guy too, 4 assists a game. So he's somebody that I think you want to. You're probably going to see Cano or RJ on him quite a bit, and we'll just kind of see how that goes. I think you could see Trimble on him a little bit too. I think that would make a lot of sense as a matchup. Um, and then Miles Bird for them, he's a sophomore, I think now. He's another pro prospect. He's somebody that could go to the draft, test the waters, probably will. 6'7". Keegan called him based on what I was kind of saying about his profile. Poor man's Drake Powell. I think there are some similarities there. Bird's a really good player. He looks to me to be a little bit more of a natural shooter, although it's funny, he's only shooting about 30% from three, and Drake's, still at like 38, 39. So, but he's a versatile type of player that he's going to fill up the box score, especially with steals, with blocks, and then um, you got to know where he is. So I think that matchup with him and Drake, I would imagine Drake gets him at the beginning, will be a really interesting matchup. I do give advantage to Drake in that. And I love to see a big Drake Powell game. I mean, we just love watching him play. He talked a good amount about players or sometimes the team as a whole struggling with the feel for the game this year. He doesn't seem to struggle with that. He seems to be in the right
Hmm.
place, the right
Good
time.
point.
He makes the right reads. Has had some awesome assists when he's had the ball in his hands a little bit more. Great vision, cutting off the ball defensively. So yeah, this is the direct pal appreciation part of the podcast. But I think that's a good matchup. Ultimately, I think we win most of these matchups. You start stacking up these different players together. Um, and then I guess the last piece is I'm ready for the Jay Witt redemption arc. That's
Hmm.
one I want to
Hmm.
see more than anything else,
Yeah,
honestly.
for sure.
Is see him have his moment and get a chance to just put a stamp on the end of the season the way that we know he can and he was prior to that last game and that last moment. So I'm
Yeah.
just happy for him that he gets another shot at it, as is his whole team as a whole. But yeah, you look at the breakdown. I think this favors Carolina, but it is March and anything can happen.
Classic Jonathan. I think it favors Carolina, so I'm taking San Diego State.
Yeah, I'm completely convinced now that it's an emotional hedge. I talked myself all the way through
100%.
this
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I wanted to give you the space in the floor to, hey, is
to
there anything
process
else
it.
you want to expand on? And that was, I was just leaning in and looking out for you. That's all that was.
Yeah.
That's a true friendship right there.
Oh man. Yeah, I
Yeah, no, I
appreciate
think
that.
that's
I
great.
definitely needed
Yeah,
it.
no, that's super good analysis, and we always appreciate your insight onto that. So, with that said, that's kind of a preview of the SDSU UNC game. What do you always say? Go where you go, do what you do. Have it all lined up. It's tomorrow at it's Tuesday at 9:10 is tip off time. So, will be the
Oh,
second
and
game.
related
Yeah,
related to that, just real quick. So the last thing that has not gotten very much attention, and I'm kind of surprised, is that Ian Jackson is observing Ramadan. So this
yeah,
guy is
yeah.
fasting sun up to sundown, and that impacts your ability to play and perform at the level that you typically are. And
Sure, sure.
and we don't know if that impacted him in the ACC tournament. He didn't really have big performances. It could have. All that to say that a 9:10 start time is that's a good start time for Ian in terms of being able to get some fluids, electrolytes, get some food in his system before the game. So that's just something else I want to bring up because I was surprised at just how little attention that got, especially with Mo Diarra went through something similar observing
Hmm.
Ramadan last year, and that was that was brought up a lot. So I think it's important to bring up because Ian's been a big part of this team, and he just didn't have the same impact in Charlotte that he has had the rest of the year.
Well, this is exactly why Bubba's on the committee, so we can make sure we get that 9-10 start
That's
time for
right.
Ian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's
I was
exactly
trying to
right.
gloss over it, but we'll just feed the haters. No, I appreciate you pointing that out for sure. So, looking at the South region as a whole, so this is, man, first of all, I think this is a wide open year where, for me, any of the top 4 to 5 seeds could be in the championship game and win it all. There were, your top dogs throughout the year, Duke, Auburn, Florida, especially recently. Houston's been up there all year. I always find it difficult to watch Houston games for whatever reason. I don't know if it's like their time. I feel like it always gets to be like February, and I've watched like 1 or 2 of their games. But going back and watching some on replay, I'm really impressed with their defense, and they do have the offensive firepower to match it. So that's kind of a holistic look. But just let's start in the South region. Have you had time to fill out your bracket or get familiar with it yet? I know you've been busy.
So still not. I mean, I have like a little bit of a sense of where everybody is. The South
Yeah, yeah.
region, I can tell you right now, despite my pick earlier, Carolina's coming out of the South, so we don't even really
I
need to
love
go
it.
into the
I
rest
love
of the
it.
matchups.
Redemption against Auburn. Storylines here, you love the 2019 potential rematch against Auburn. You've got, of course, Michigan State in there. You even
Mhm.
have Iowa State in there, back in what, 2014, 2015, whatever year it
Yeah,
was where we got bounced in the second round by them. So,
14. Yep.
um, 14, yeah. So some tough ones there, but the one that really fascinates me off the start, and I think a lot of people, including the Louisville team themselves, were surprised that they got an 8 seed. A lot of people thought they might get upwards toward a 5 or 6. The ACC is definitely down, and I think that didn't help them. But I think they got a little bit of a shaft getting that 8 seed and then having to play Auburn the next round. Your initial thoughts on that? It is in Kentucky, but it's in Lexington.
Well, they at least got that, but not a little. I mean, that was
It's
that
pretty
was
rough.
that was really rough. And one thing we didn't talk about when the bracket came out and the Carolina piece of it, as soon as I saw Louisville as an 8, I went, "Oh, we're cooked, man!" Like,
Right,
there's
right. Like who else
if
is in
that
here?
because in my head it's okay. This is how you're treating the ACC. We
Sure,
already
sure.
know what people feel about the conference. The conference was bad. There's
Yeah,
no question.
yeah.
But consistently throughout the year, Duke, Louisville, and Clemson. Duke is on a
Top
different
25.
tier, but
Yeah,
Louisville and
yeah,
Clemson, very good teams.
yeah.
I mean, you're talking Louisville before the Duke loss. They lost once in 2025. Once, Craig. They
Yeah,
lost to Georgia Tech,
yeah.
and Georgia Tech is just one of those teams that, I mean, they had Duke on the
They,
ropes early in
yeah,
that game
yeah, yeah.
and in the quarterfinals. They beat Clemson as well. We've seen them. They beat us last year. They beat Duke last year. Damon Stoudemire has been able to get his team to be giant killers, and
Yeah.
that is the only loss prior to the championship in the entire year.
I know.
And
I
you're
was
an 8.
shocked. I
Yeah,
was shocked. I'd be
yeah,
pissed as well. Yeah, their
yeah.
reaction kind of said everything on the ESPN live cam. It was too honest. I was like, I can't
As it
blame you at
should
all.
be.
I
I
mean, who cares
mean,
if you're in Kentucky or not? You get Auburn as a draw in the second round, which by the way, I'm picking Louisville in that game. So
I I love that. I mean, if nothing else, don't give somebody like Pat Kelsey a reason to have an additional edge. I mean, that
correct.
guy, that guy wakes up with a chip on his shoulder in the best possible way. You don't want to put him in a situation where they have fuel to the fire, and it's clear this team is going to come out hungry. And it's not just that they're playing with an edge. I mean, Chucky
Right.
Hepburn has been awesome.
He's
Terrence Edwards
sensational.
is playing
Yeah.
great down the stretch. Uh, the one thing that's hurt them, and I think could have been a difference in that championship game, is they have Rain Smith, who really lit us up. Which I mean, I was saw that one coming. So if they can get Rain Smith, and I'm not sure his availability, but that to me is a definitely a factor. Uh, Maybe not as much against Creighton, although Creighton's not a pushover by any means, but it's Creighton, right? That they got matched up with.
Yep. Yeah, and Creighton's
And
not happy. Like, can you imagine that as your 8 seed? Come on. In Kentucky?
look, I mean, you're a 9 seed, okay, but Auburn is a team that should not be happy. I mean,
Oh
that's
yeah.
you're the number one overall seed, and you got Louisville as an 8 seed. Louisville should be I think 5-6 maybe at the lowest, right?
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, that was a shock. And like I said, I thought for sure there's no way Carolina's getting in now if Louisville's an eight.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then we surprised very shortly after. So the next game to get called that night was Michigan and UC San Diego. And I've done a little bit of research on this one too. Michigan, historically this season, has been a team that turns the ball over and has been very, very sloppy. UC San Diego is the best at forcing turnovers in the entire D1. So if you're looking for a 12-5 and a feisty team to get after a Power 5 conference team, you're going to take UCSD. I think they could pull it off. I haven't been high on Michigan all year, even though recently they've just had their ups and downs. They do have two 7-footers, so that's always a size advantage there. But they've been up and down, and recently they're on and up through their the Big Ten tournament win. But that's going to be an interesting one. And 12-5 has not been as popular in recent years, but still a very popular pick. And I think UC San Diego could pull that off.
Yeah, that's one when the bracket came out. That one's staring me in the face. They're incredibly well coached. Like you said, I mean that piece about turnovers, Danny Wolf for Michigan, his highlight reel is awesome. It's one of the best highlight reels that you'll see. You have a 7-footer handling the ball the way he does, the playmaking with the ball, all the things that he can do. The highlights don't include his turnovers, and he is going to give the ball to the other team. So
Hmm.
that one I think is definitely one to watch. Dusty May, obviously a really good coach. He's been there
Sure.
before recently with Florida Atlantic, so it's not like he's new to the tournament. But yeah, that to me has upset written all over it. Plus, we all know that when a Wolverine goes up against a Triton, Triton wins every time.
You may as well put San Diego on the championship line then.
Look, I think we need how much play does a Triton get in terms of just like we need more Tritons in the news in pop culture, the mainstream. Haven't had a Triton since like Little Mermaid. This is Ariel's
Yeah.
dad's name, I think. But no, I
Now
love
we're
I
going
love the
way back to the
mascot.
90s, talking old school ACC at the same time. Let's go.
Yeah, I told myself I wasn't going to use that line, but here we are.
Yeah, it's all good.
A great nickname, and I think that's a favorable matchup. So it'll be interesting. Michigan certainly has the pieces. Trey Donaldson, that last play against what was it, the semifinals against Maryland. I can't
Oh
get it out of
yeah,
my
coast to
brain, but
coast. Yeah.
they've got pieces for sure. But that's going to be a tough matchup.
Yeah, yeah, it's like one of those classics where you just see a smaller team with more energy and being, feisty around the ball, just really frustrating the other guys. You saw with Purdue and Zach Edey when they lost as a 1 seed, and sometimes that's how it plays out. So, the next game here, speaking of Danny Wolf, the Yale transfer to Michigan, we've got Texas A&M versus Yale as a fourth versus 13. We don't have to go individual predictions on these, but right below that, Ole Miss, and of course against UNC and or San Diego State, depending how you hedge your bets. The old Iowa State Lipscomb matchup. Iowa State has um, a couple players who were injured earlier in the year. They've got one back. They do not have back for the rest of the year is Gilbert, out for the tournament. He was averaging about 13 points per game. So, do I think Lipscomb pulls it off? I don't. I would love to see it, especially if we're going to be the ones upsetting Ole Miss and then upsetting them. And then, hey, it's Elite Eight Carolina. So that's how I want the road to play out. But, if I say that too loudly, the trolls start popping out from under the bridge.
they're they're on the bridge at this point, man. There's no getting away. Gilbert's a dude. I think that is a factor. They have other guys on that team that can kind of carry the load. I agree. I think they at least get past the first round, and then from there it gets a little bit more interesting depending on who comes out in that sixth spot there. But
Yep.
Yale has one of the leading scorers in the country, and I mean, they were here last year, and uh, who did they upset last year? They had a first round upset.
Oh, I forgot who
It
right
was
now.
Auburn.
But
It was
yeah,
Auburn
yeah.
actually. Yeah. So they
Okay.
knocked
Yeah.
off Auburn as a 13 last year. So that's an interesting one. And I mean, I'll be honest, I am worried for A&M. When I saw that come out, I was worried for A&M
Mm.
just
Hmm.
because they feel like a team that they can go a little cold offensively. And as much as I love Wade Taylor the fourth, because when he's on and last year in the tournament in that Houston game, that was
Hmm.
that was just high level theater. Uh, they can go cold. So that one, I don't think I'm going Yale, but at least I'm going to do a double take when I submit my bracket on that one.
Yeah. A lot of these 11 through 13 seeds, I'll be doing quite a few brackets and quite a few double takes. I'll come out with the official one. Don't worry. I'm not going to be, like these guys like Rothstein who said, UNC should never have been included. But if they win a couple games, I won't be surprised. Like, which one is it, bro? Come on. You got to pick one and stick to it. So I'm not going to do that with my bracket. But looking down at the very south side of the South bracket, we've got Marquette and New Mexico. So Richard Pitino and Shaka Smart, two really strong coaches there. Gotta love Shaka. Has had Marquette in top 25 all year. You think they got up to 15 or so, and then wrap the year up right at 25. And then you've got the classic Izzo in March, taking on Bryant in the first round, and then it'll either be New Mexico or Marquette in the second round. And from there, gosh, who knows what happens to the Sweet 16? But that's a look at the South region. Jonathan, any thoughts at a high level? You see Louisville upsetting Auburn. You see Michigan State getting in the Final Four. What stands out to you here? What's going to be fun?
Well, I think of those two things, the likelihood, it's more likely that Michigan State makes the Final Four than Louisville beats Auburn. I think Auburn's just too. Louisville's fun, man. They're fun, but Auburn's
They
just
are.
such a complete team, and I do think even though they've lost 3 games here in the last few weeks, if you look at who those games are to,
Sure.
it's the top tier of the SEC, which is the top tier of the country this year. They're losing the top
Yeah.
10
And that
teams,
experience helps. Yeah.
and so I think even just them getting an extra couple of days off, they've been a little banged up. But they are, to me, they're the most complete team in the country. So I have them coming out of that bracket, but I do like Michigan State. And
Yep.
they have come a long way since we played them in Maui. And Jace Richardson, I'm pretty sure he did not play in that game. That's Jason Richardson's son all the way back to 2000. That's Michigan State's last national championship. Jason Richardson's on that team with Mateen Cleaves and Charlie Bell and the Flintstones from Flint, Michigan. Awesome team. That was a fun team to watch. That's also the last Big Ten national championship. It's all the way back in 2000. So it would be pretty cool, just from a non-UNC perspective, to see Jason's son Jace carry Michigan State to the Final Four. So they've got pieces
Yep.
to do it. I do like Auburn there. I guess the other thing about that side of the bracket, that 7-10 game could be fireworks. I think if you're going back to players to watch, Cam Jones from Marquette can put up big numbers. He's an awesome guard, really electric player to watch. And then for New Mexico, Donovan Dent is one of the leading scorers in the country as well. So that will be a really fun matchup. That could be one of the most fun matchups of the first round.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be super competitive South region. And I'll just kind of blitz through the West here and the East and the Midwest, one region at a time. Stop me if there's anything you want to talk on. We have no time limit on this, but first things first here is number one seed Florida, who has been really, really surging recently and playing some of their best basketball of the entire season in a very jam-packed SEC, where I do believe that they were kind of burying the lead almost throughout the year a little bit. It seems like they're just really spiking at the right time, and it's like all the talk has been on Alabama from last year, this year, and then on Auburn and how deep the SEC is, and then Florida's kind of, at least in my mind, I didn't watch too much of them this year, kind of snuck in, and suddenly they're there's talk about Tennessee too, but then, Florida's up there in the top five and suddenly they're here for that one spot. So that's going to be an interesting one. I will actually be going to the Florida game and the UConn Oklahoma game on Friday night to see Danny Hurley and boo him in person. So
Oh, I
super
thought you were
stoked
going to
about that.
support him. I thought you were going to there to encourage him,
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's it. Yeah, I don't think
that's
he feeds
awesome.
off encouragement. I think he feeds off the booze. So in a way, I am encouraging him by just
Yeah,
booing
yeah.
him.
That is actually his fuel. Yeah, for sure. So you should
So I
just
might
shout
fire
words of
him up. Yeah.
encouragement, and that'll get in his head.
Yeah, I'll be looking to sit lower level, and I'm hoping that, I can, I'll see one of those death stares and probably feel it in the stadium. I've never been in the presence of Dan Hurley when he's been upset like that, but maybe he'll get tossed. Maybe it'll just be a heated game. And if anything, maybe I could buy an OU Brady Manic shirt or jersey to wear as a nice little nod to him. So
That is epic.
um,
Yes, please do
those,
that. That's
I think I'll
fantastic.
try to ship one out tonight on Amazon or something. That'd be great. We've got Memphis and Colorado State. Vegas actually has has Colorado State favored in this one. Memphis had just won their tournament. However, CSU also won theirs and is a favorite. Memphis does have some dudes, but with Penny Hardaway, they've kind of been a little up and down at times, a little inconsistent. Colorado State playing really good ball. Maryland and Grand Canyon. Maryland has taken so many close losses recently, even to the point of, a couple in a row on buzzer beaters that have been tough, but they're playing really good ball. Drake in Missouri. This is where I start to say, let's see if the SEC can prove themselves or not, because you get some of these smaller teams and guys like we referenced at the top of the show, and Bennett Starts, who's just an absolute machine when it comes down to it. He could be your name of the tournament, especially if Drake can win not just one game, maybe two, maybe he gets them to three. It could be really fun. There have been 11 seeds in the Final Four in the last couple years, which is it becoming a trend? Is it not? We'll kind of see with Drake, and with UNC potentially making a run is at 11. So that's the two that I'm hoping for if we're talking 11s. Then we looked at Texas Tech and then UNC Wilmington. Just a really really strong mid-major school, has been for years. Just south of that is Kansas and Arkansas. So we've got Rick Pitino, with St. John sitting there waiting on either Bill Self or John Calipari. So that's your breakdown. Some legendary coaches in there. Gosh, you may as well have Billy Donovan come back for Florida at this rate.
Yeah, well, uh, he's definitely a name that a lot of people are waiting on to see what he'll do if he comes back to college. But yeah, the Gators, like you said, I mean, I think it probably is just how loaded the SEC has been, but for whatever reason, they have kind of been maybe not one of the headliners, and they should be. This is a deserving number one seed, no question. The fact that they really took control in that SEC tournament, it was pretty impressive. By the second half of those games, they were in control against Alabama. They were in control against Tennessee in the championship. And they're a complete team too. Maybe not as complete as Auburn, in my opinion, but with Walter Clayton and Elijah Martin, who also transferred from Florida Atlantic. You got the Florida Atlantic guys spreading out all over the place and in the tournament here. And then their interior as well. We saw them in Charlotte, on TV. One of those games
Mhm.
where Carolina got down big in the first half, looked just left for dead basically, and then
Yeah.
comes roaring back to take the lead with about 4 minutes left. Had that game in their sights. So that Florida team is tough. I do, gosh, I love St. John's. I love the St.
I
John's
know.
team.
I know. It's a great story.
Before the bracket, yeah, before the bracket came out, I was all about St. John's in the Final Four. Florida's tough, and you mentioned a ton of other teams in that bracket, but
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with the Johnnies because
Yeah, I love
ultimately
it.
Rick Pitino back in the Final Four with a different school this time, for the first time, maybe the first time since he was there with Kentucky, right? And what a
Hmm.
story that would be.
I know.
So, and they're just a tough team. They're physical. R.J. Lewis is a stud. Kadari Richmond has really come on for them. They definitely paid a good price for him coming out of the portal from Seton Hall, but he's been worth it. And we recognize Simeon Wilcher as somebody who had committed to Carolina, goes to St. John's. He's now starting for them. So I'm going Johnny's over Gators.
Nice.
Just off the cuff, I'm going 1-2, but you mentioned a lot of teams in that bracket, and
Yeah.
Drake
Yeah.
would be a really fun story as we talked about with McCollum and Sturts and company.
For
Um,
sure.
that matchup with Dennis Gates in Missouri and Mark Mitchell transferring from Duke, like
Hmm.
that's another one that I put up there as a top first round matchup.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, the West region is absolutely stacked. Definitely hard to argue that it's not the most stacked of the four, but there are cases to be made everywhere out here. So, quickly jumping into the East, we've obviously got Duke down the road.
Not going to
They're
make it.
also definitely going to have American upsetting them. Jackie Manuel taking it to Duke,
Let's go,
just like he
Jackie.
just like he used to do with his defense.
That's
You
right.
love to see it, absolutely. Uh, Definitely don't follow us in on that potentially. We cannot be held responsible for any bets. Then there's Mississippi State and Baylor. Again, those games are in Raleigh. That'll be the afternoon session. I love Baylor there. Would be cool to see Jeremy Roach going up against his old team in Duke. And then we've got a 5-12 in Oregon and Liberty. And I want to introduced the world to Liberty's elite three-point shooter. If you haven't been watching this kid, he is absolutely fantastic. His name is Cade Matheny. The last three games, has had 16 threes, averaging 5 to 6 per game, including a game where he just went off shooting seven. I think he was 7 of 10, so shooting about 70% there. Really fun to watch. He's just one of those, like Jack Golke, as soon as he gets open, he's ready to go. He doesn't really take twos whatsoever. He's all about shooting from beyond the arc, and you just have to kind of chase him around. He's almost like a little video game cheat code at times. And if he gets hot, and just looking at his stats from the year, like it's not a coincidence that he's made five, he's made four. He's done this several times where he's in the anywhere from 3 to 7 range throughout the year. So we'll see what he does to Oregon. Will they pull it off? Who knows? But he could be a little bit of a storyline there. And if he does pull it off, then you have two shooters because you maybe get Caleb Love in Arizona if they beat Akron, and then if Caleb sees this guy just launching from the beyond the arc, I don't know if he has enough self-control to not do it himself. So some interesting storylines there. And then the bottom half is BYU versus VCU, and then we've got Wisconsin and your Grizz. That's the team that's going to take on, who is it? The Tritons of UC San Diego in the tournament, the Grizzlies and the Tritons.
Uh, that would be phenomenal. I hope their fight song is as good as their mascot because ours is better. Uh, and if we beat Wisconsin, I will come on the pod and sing the fight song. So get ready for that. Buckle up if that happens. Apparently, the Grizz are the luckiest team in the tournament, and the luckiest team by that metric, which is a real metric,
It
has only
is.
advanced 3 times out of 21. All I saw was that team has advanced 3 times. That's what I'm sticking to.
There you go.
Um, yeah, that's loaded, man. So that's the three, and then it was Bama is the two, right?
Then we
At the
got
bottom
Bama and
of
Robert Morris, yeah, and
Yep.
St. Mary's, second, runner up in the WCC against Gonzaga, but definitely a lethal squad there. And then honestly, you have Vanderbilt, which is like for me, it's like the forgotten SEC team that somehow snuck in
Yeah.
because they played a hard schedule. So I don't see that 7-10 happening personally. But yeah, we got Bama in there too.
Tyler Nickel with Vanderbilt now.
That's right,
There are Carolina transfers galore in that
everywhere.
section of the bracket with Caleb Love, and you got James Okonkwo at Akron. So you
That's
got
right.
you
So
got
you got
multiple
three, yeah.
transfers
Uh-huh.
in that bracket to watch.
That's good stuff.
Um,
Yeah,
man, I mean, you want my quick prediction for
yeah,
for
for
that how
sure.
that plays out? Um, American against Duke is way closer than anyone expects. It comes down to it comes down to Americans at the free throw line. They hit the first one, they miss the second
Stop.
one, recover. Hopefully, they have a player named Marvin because he's going to score, and they're going to win. Man, it's hard to pick
That's
against.
beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, it's in our intro. You got to bring it up as
Yeah,
much as
yeah.
possible. It's 20 years since that happened.
So
This
hold up. If that happens, then we're gonna put that version in our intro, and then
Absolutely
we'll get an updated version of a Caleb Love top of the key when Arizona beats Duke in the Elite Eight, and we're just gonna have a whole
perfect,
fresh intro for next year.
perfect. Um, Man, I mean, the Caleb Love storyline. I just need it to happen.
I know.
I
I know. We've
need
needed it every time.
Yeah, and I need him. It wasn't right this year. The way that he just had a rough game. They were never on. Arizona struggled out of the gates a little bit that game in Tucson early in the season against Duke. So we need one more bye-bye. I would love that. I do think that Duke, if Flag, and it's a real question because that ankle injury was nasty. Like that,
It was brutal.
he gets up there. He was way up there, and
Yeah.
he came down hard on that ankle. So I think it's a real question. I don't think it's a question that he plays. I think he's going to play. Maybe not that much against American, but once you get to the second round, he's going to play. But how explosive can he be? Can he do the things that he normally does? Because he relies a lot on his athleticism on both
Sure.
ends.
Yeah.
So that's a question. But I mean, I had them in the Final Four kind of before everything. I do think Bama's a tough matchup for them because what is one of the top two things offensively you got to do against Duke? You got to move the ball, and you got to hit a lot of threes. What does
Mhm.
Bama do? They do those two things really,
Very
really
well.
well.
Yeah.
Their guards probe the lane better than anybody, keep their dribble, kick
Yep.
out to open shooters. They've got multiple guys. If they're hot, they're really, really
Yep.
hard to beat.
And it sounds
Um,
like they're going to get Grant Nelson back as well in game one. So,
I don't know who that is, but
I
don't
think he goes by the nickname Trash Stash. And so if you recognize that, do you know that?
I don't acknowledge a player named Grant Nelson, especially not in the 24 tournament.
Next.
Um, yeah. I mean, I think the other guy we haven't talked about that we wanted to was John Tonji with Wisconsin. And
Ah, great
Tonji,
player.
he's a great player. He's so fun to watch. I mean, he can score 30 points and have 28 of them be at the free throw line. Like this guy
Right, right.
gets to the line at an unbelievable rate. He's just a really versatile wing. I love watching him when he's on. They beat Arizona. Arizona came to Wisconsin early in the season, and he was electric in that game. He's somebody who's gone off for 30 plus points multiple times. I don't think that's a great matchup for Bama, honestly. So I think that'll be
Mhm.
interesting if those two teams match up. Obviously, we've already established that the Grizz are going to beat Wisconsin, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, Wisconsin's an interesting team. I have my eye on them. I think they could make some noise, as good as Bama can be if they're healthy and they're playing at their A level.
Yeah, for sure. So the last region here is the Midwest. We've got Houston as the overall one seed against SIU, Edwardsville. In the second round, the winner there, likely Houston, takes on Gonzaga or Georgia. Just not a believer in Georgia. Gonzaga does win the WCC, and it's hard to bet against Gonzaga come March. And I think that's a really tough matchup for Houston that we can kind of circle back to here in a minute. But looking a little farther down, we got Clemson and McNeese State. Will Wade and McNeese, obviously a hot name around the triangle right now, is a potential visit to Raleigh to be NC State's next head coach. That'll be a potential matchup just to watch. Clemson, obviously the second best team, third best team in the ACC. They were one of the few teams to beat Duke this year. Hard to take that away from anyone's resume. So that will probably be a popular 5-12 upset. I'm not sure I see it happening. And also, outside of Duke, go ACC. We need the representation to get to the round of 32 and Sweet 16. Always like to cheer for the teams up to that point. Looking ahead to Purdue and High Point. High Point came back in their conference tournament final from, I think, at least double digits down, maybe 15 points down to win their game. So showed some resilience there. I don't know if they have what it takes to knock off Purdue, but I do think that'll be a fairly popular pick if you're going to go with the 13. Grand Canyon over against Maryland as a 4-13 as well might be another popular one. 4-13s haven't happened that much in recent years, so I wouldn't invest too much into it or even feel forced to pick one. There are again some really good 1 through 5 seeds this year. I think your focus might be more on the 6-11 line personally this year. So then we've got at the 6, we've got Illinois taking on a couple more bubble teams in Texas or Xavier. Again, very glad that UNC is not matched up with Texas. We know how that always turns out poorly. You do have Kentucky here as a 3 seed, not against Oakland this time. I don't see them necessarily losing as a 3 seed back-to-back years. This is a Kentucky team that's very talented. Maybe their name got lost a little bit in the SEC because of all the other noise out there. But again, you have so many teams in from the SEC, and it's a lot of it's deserved. You can argue how many are deserved. Does Vanderbilt deserve to be in? Does Georgia? Some of these teams that had not as good records, but Kentucky's been up there and they earned that 3 seed. So we'll see what kind of noise they can make. And then the last two here, we've got UCLA, which is Carolina's only quad one win of the year, taking on Utah State, and another strong SEC team in Tennessee taking on Wofford, but Wofford without Fletcher. Thank goodness, another name we are not allowed to mention on this podcast. We should probably bleep it out. I don't necessarily see any 2 or 15, 2 versus 15
Please,
matchups happening.
please bleep
So
that out. That's great.
I will.
Yeah.
I will. Sorry, Carolina Nation. That's 2 for 2 when I should know better.
The one thing that's a fun watch with that game, because I do think Tennessee's just got too much. Uh, the fact that they played as well as they did in the SEC, the way it was loaded, says a lot. But Wofford has a guy who shoots free throws granny style
Sure does.
in Division I college basketball. I don't think I've
Mhm.
is it John Barry? It's one of the
I forgot the
Barrys.
guy's name. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was
It's
his thing in the NBA.
yeah.
So he's carrying that forward. You don't see that hardly ever.
It's
That'll
something.
just be fun to take a look at. You mentioned
Yeah.
Houston at the beginning that you just kind of wonder about them in the tournament. They're always Kelvin Sampson's done an amazing job. He's got a machine working down
Yeah.
there, and honestly, next year they're going to be even better than they are this year. They finally are getting the 5 stars, high end 5 stars that match up with just the level of play that they've had.
Yeah.
But they are probably the most physical team in the country. They play tenacious defense. Um, Guys like Joseph Tugler, you probably line him up at tight end or defensive end. The guy is just he's uh, he's a wrecking ball in a basketball uniform. He's pretty fun to watch, and they have L.J. Cryer, who was at Baylor previously, can really shoot it. Um, I'm having a hard time picking against them. I think I would like them over Tennessee if they got that far, but it's a long way to go. And
Mhm.
remind me who the 8-9 matchup was, because
The 8-9 in this is Gonzaga and Georgia.
I mean that's a really tough 8-9
hmm
to
I mean,
be
the eights are
lined
better than the fives this year by the metrics, and it's not that close.
right. So that's tough. I actually would go in a different direction here and say Georgia upsets Gonzaga. I have
Hmm.
not been impressed with Gonzaga. I think they just do have some limitations compared to typical Mark Few team.
Yeah,
And Asa Newell with Georgia, um, I mean they've got some dudes too.
sure.
It's Cyril Sumto, I think, who had committed to Kentucky. I think I got his name right, but that guy is a grown man too. Uh, I think Georgia surprises. I think they get past Gonzaga. I don't think they beat Houston
Nice.
if they do, but
Yeah,
um, so gosh, I'm
I like it.
having a
I
hard
like
time
it.
getting away from Houston. But there's going to be a 4 or 5 seed. So it's not just going to be ones and twos. I think if there is a
Yeah,
bracket that I look at, that's the one where I think Houston's probably as good as they are and as well as they played, especially 19-1 in Big 12 play.
yeah.
They were awesome. But I think they're the most vulnerable, and it's just been that's been the issue for them in the tournament. They got unlucky last year with Jamal Shead getting hurt, so hopefully they stay
Sure.
healthy.
Yeah.
I would like to see them make it back to the Final Four and get to San Antonio.
Yeah, I'm gonna be waffling back and forth on Houston until probably about 11:55 on Thursday when I have to submit my bracket. So, I love the fact that their defense is so good. I always think defense wins championships. In years past, again, injuries have hurt them or their offense isn't clicking as much. This year in the games that I have watched and gone to rewatch, like I mentioned, just catching up on a few. Shout out to YouTube TV for recording an unlimited amount of college basketball this entire season. Awesome stuff. So I got to watch a lot of Houston's more recent games, ones against Kansas and different Big 12 schools, and they're ranked 10th in offense too, and so they're a really complete team this year. It's hard to argue against metrics when you're top 10 in both. So I think I'm going to stick with them coming out of that region. Go with my gut there. But gosh, who knows? This could all change by Thursday and a couple days from now.
Yeah, I mean just make sure you're using paper that's recyclable. Because
Right.
yeah, I think this is one of those years that feels like by Friday afternoon, not even Thursday afternoon, I feel like my
Man.
bracket's gonna be busted. So it
Yeah.
feels if the tournaments are any indication just of the wild action that we saw. Um, but the interesting thing is there was a lot of chalk ultimately, right, in terms of who was winning those tournaments. So
Yeah.
I wonder if this tournament follows suit where there's a lot of
hmm
fireworks, there's a lot of close
hmm
games, there's buzzer beaters. There's
Yep.
going to be some upsets, but ultimately, the top teams do rise to the top, and that's
Yeah.
what you see in the Final Four.
Yeah. My gut right now says some wild times in the first round and close to chalk by Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Again, I could waffle on that, but I think the top 25 has looked so good this year, that that it's just been really, really fun to watch, first of all, but I think that's how it's going to end up. Hey,
So
but that's the fun in bracket madness, right? In March Madness. It's great.
My Montana Wofford Final Four matchup's not going to happen, huh?
No, no, no. Believe. Just hedge it a little bit. You'll be all right. Yeah, that's good stuff. So really can't go wrong. The people who pick the mascots and choose their brackets based on mascots will probably still beat you, and that's really, that's what the spirit of March is all about.
the Tritons then are the pick. I'm telling you, a
That's it.
fantastic
That's it.
mascot.
That's it. So, well, yeah, we have talked your ear off if you've made it this far. About an hour and plus, I don't know, hour 15 or so for this episode, and just really wanted to run through it because it is the best time of the year, and it's fun to take these games one game at a time and just see what you come up with. There's no wrong answer when it comes to brackets. Just pick some fun ones, follow your gut. That one you do on the first Sunday night or Monday night or whenever you do it is probably going to be the one that's best. Don't overthink it. That's where I always get into bigger problems. But Jonathan, I think we've done a good job covering the field. I think we've got everything in place for this matchup against SDSU. I think we hopefully chilled out some of the drama that we've been seeing the last couple of days and explained a little bit of the committee insight. Whether or not it'll actually turn the tone down remains to be seen. Narrator,
Or
it
burned
did
it
not.
burned it off for ourselves. Yeah, it felt good. It felt good
Yeah.
to get that out there. Um, I guess before we leave the tournament talk, who's your national champion? And I get that that could change by right before it's time to lock in your bracket. But who do you have at this point?
Outside of Carolina,
Of course, yeah.
of course, or Montana. I really am sticking with St. John's.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
man.
So I'm gonna stick with it. Like I said, I've watched more of their games than any other team outside of UNC this year. I've been really impressed with Rick Pitino and the energy level, and the defense has been absolutely suffocating
Yeah,
on some of their opponents. There's a little bit of magic in the air with what's going on in the Big East and with him, and the fact that he won the championship and then won the tourney championship and now gets a 2 seed. The only thing kind of standing in their way besides number 1 seed Florida, and of course the rest of the field, should they get to the Final Four, teams like Auburn on that side,
right.
is the fact that no number 1 or number 2 seed that has entered the season unranked has ever advanced to a Final Four.
Wow.
So they could at least be the first one there. And then, as you know, once you get to the Final Four with that much talent, it's kind of, 50-50 in terms of who wins. That's what it feels like.
Well, he famously said, and I think I have this right. I'm going to have to check it, but he said when he took the job at St. John's that if they didn't win the national championship, he would jump in the East River. I
Sounds
don't
right. I
know.
remember that. Yeah.
I don't know what he's going to do if they actually win. He's, I mean, he has a Louisville tattoo from winning the national championship there. So, oh yeah, so he was in the Final Four. I completely forgot that Rick Pitino was in the Final Four with Louisville. That
hmm
happened, even though the record books took it away
Yeah.
with the championship.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so yeah, man, what a story that would be.
Yeah.
And you know that Tate Frazier, who Rick Pitino talk has been so much of his podcast over the
Oh, yeah.
years.
He's loved it. Yeah.
What that storyline would be like for March, but for him, uh, yeah, it's man. If that now you got me just thinking about if that happens, that'd be wild.
It'd be
Anyway, back to you,
extraordinary.
Craig.
Yeah. Yeah. No, back to you because I got to ask you the same question. Who do you have as your national champion outside of Carolina and Montana and maybe the
I,
Trojans?
Man, right. I've got Auburn. I'm sticking with Auburn. I think
hmm
they've been throughout the year. They've been the best team. Last year we saw UConn was the best team, and they paid it off with the championship back to back. I think Bruce Pearl, not my favorite coach or personality, but I think he gets it done. He's been there once before now,
Is
so
that
he's
spot
been on.
reserved for Jeff Capel? Jason Cable?
Yeah, pick a cable. But I think they get it done. I think Janai Broom is for me. He's the player of the year. Cooper Flag. That's one of the tightest races we've seen in a long time. You could go either
Sure.
way, but Broom just something about his presence and mentality, just his toughness, and he makes big plays when it matters the most. And I just like their cast of other guys they have. There's not one guy that's kind of the
hmm
Robin to his Batman, but if you look at guys like Chad Baker Mazzara and just go down the list of some of their guards, Miles Kelly, it seems like they always have somebody step up on a big night. And I go all the way back to I didn't know they were for real before the season started. It was that Houston game that they played when we were out in Kansas all the way back in
hmm
November.
hmm
And watching them in that game, I went, okay, these guys are the real deal because that was a high level basketball game early in the season, and they just have guys step up in big moments. Tahad Pettiford, their freshman, was huge in that game. A close friend of Elliot Cadeau, actually, from New Jersey as well. And so anyway, I could go on and on about Auburn. Honestly, as long as it's not Duke, I'm happy. Let's keep it going. It's been 9 years. Let's make it 10 since they've won the national championship. And no matter what they say about anything as it relates to the rivalry with Carolina, we won the championship more recently than you did. So that's the
Exactly.
biggest thing outside of Carolina, of course, winning 7 games. It would be the first team to win 7 games for a national championship, I think. So let's be the first to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but as long as Duke doesn't win and Carolina goes on a run, I think I'm happy with this postseason.
Right. Right. Yeah, and then we'll have a lot of off-season content to talk about in terms of portal and lineup changes and all that. It'd be probably tough to keep up with. So we look forward to that as well. But hopefully we have a couple weeks here of some really fun podcasts coming your way. Definitely going to try to get one out once a week while Carolina's still in it. We'll still be right here by it. And just want to close the show out now with a point out. We got 2 guys on the roster. The first one I want to point out to is Van Allen Lubin, who dropped 20 points against Duke in his last game in the ACC tourney. He's just been an absolute monster on the boards, monster down low, a completely changed player. I think he's averaging or been in double digits since probably mid-February. I think since the state game, if I remember correctly, he's been absolutely tearing it up. And so during that stretch, just need to see more Val. We had Van Allen Lubin with the rental van out in Kansas. It's like we knew all along. Had to send that picture to you guys the other day because it's just cracked me up. What a good trip. But yeah, Van Allen Lubin has really been something special the last couple of weeks. And Jonathan, I know you have a point out as well, but you might want to have some commentary on Val first.
Yeah, he's been awesome. He's been so fun to watch. He's just such a smart player, and he is crafty, but he's also, I mean, he's a physical dude, and he's a good athlete as well. And you've seen all of those pieces of his game outside of the three-point shooting. We don't need any more of that. But outside of that, he has been just so solid. And like you said, he's been crashing the boards. This is the guy that finished the season at Vanderbilt on a tear last year as
Hmm.
well.
Yep.
And I do think, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but you look to next year, you still want to bring in a starting center. But man, if you can bring Val back in a backup role,
Hmm.
um, he's a monster. He's
Yep.
undersized, but he doesn't play like it. And
Not
he got the
recently.
best of right. He got the best of 7-2 Common Malawach in that Duke
Yep.
game. So yeah, that's a great point out. Mine is going to the other guy who was star 1A, I think, in that Duke game was Elliot Cadeau. And
Hmm.
we've talked a lot about just how up and down his sophomore season has been, but he played arguably the best game of his career against Duke. And
Yep.
it wasn't like he had a career high in points or even assists in that game, but it's when he plays under control, when he plays with good feel for the game, and 3 for 3 from three, all of those shots were good shots. He's
Yep.
he's not he's not hesitating, and that's key for him, is not hesitating on his jump shot. The only guy on our team to hit a three in the game, which still feels a little bit surreal,
Wild.
but
Yeah.
and he just made big plays, not just big plays, the right play. And that's big for
Hmm.
him, is not trying to do too much, just make the right play at the right moment. And I'm so happy for him to have that type of performance. We need him to continue it into this March run. So pointing out to Elliott, great point out to Val too, and a point out to Van Allen Lubin.
Always. Always. And to Badams. Point out to Badams for the rental van.
Oh my gosh.
Classic. Yeah. Feels
And get
like
us
forever
in.
ago at this point that we were in Kansas, man. What a season it's been.
I still can't believe that happened. He was key in getting us out there. So that's a pretty unbelievable part of the fact that,
Yep.
yeah, part of the season we were in Allen Fieldhouse back in November.
Yep.
Do you have a point out to anyone else? Anyone else you want to just, shine a light on, I guess, as we wrap up? Do you want to shout out the haters?
I I do want to shout out the haters, honestly, because God, I didn't think they could be louder than they were on Twitter, but over the last week and a half, and again, a lot of people point out, well, it's Twitter. Like you know where you're posting. You're right. you're right. It's where our audience is, and so we're gonna be there. But yeah, shout out to to the John Rothsteins, to the Seth Davises, to the Stephen A. Smiths, to the John Fantas. God, that hurts to say.
Come back around, Fanta. We need you back.
I know. If there's one guy that we've followed and loved all year, and it still is, I get where he's coming from. I'm not mad at him, but man, it hurt to have to send you that clip where Fanta didn't have our back. But he's a Big East guy too, and so I get it. I get where he's coming from, and I trust his analysis. So there are multiple angles on this whole ordeal. But yeah, shout out to the Seth Davis, to the Seth Greenberg. I don't even know what Jay Williams said. Probably shout out to Jay Williams. Probably shout out to any big commentator you can think of on ESPN. But gosh, there's so much noise out there. Shout out to all the haters. It's time to prove something a different way and get the win over SDSU. And if you want to piss this team off, go for it. RJ plays best when he's angry. Seth's locked in. This team has talent. You can keep saying that they don't or that they don't deserve it, but I'm ready for them to prove it, and I think they're going to.
Bottom line, Craig, the sky is Carolina blue, and it's always sunny in Dayton.
You're dang right. And the ceiling is the roof. And I'm wearing a Brady Manic jersey to the Oklahoma game here against Danny Hurley. That's that.
That's the storyline that I didn't know we were going to get tonight. That's fantastic. You
I had to
buried the
save
lead
something
with that.
for you. I know. Appreciate you all being here with us. Best time of the year, man. We're going to wrap it up with one big go Heels. And hey, we made it off the bubble. Enjoy the next day or two, and then from there it's a potential game on Friday versus Ole Miss. So we'll wrap it up and we'll say go Heels.
Go Heels.